The hotel lobby shimmered with marble floors, golden lights, and the faint sound of a piano playing somewhere in the distance. It was the kind of place where luxury was louder than kindness, where the staff smiled for tips, not for people. Behind the polished counter stood Manager Davis, a man who measured worth by wardrobe and status. His suit was sharper than his manners, his watch brighter than his smile. Every time a wealthy guest walked in, his back straightened. Every time someone ordinary appeared, his tone changed, colder, thinner, dismissive. That evening, the revolving glass doors opened, letting in a gust of rain and a man in a worn brown jacket. His shoes were dusty, his hair damp, but his eyes, calm, kind, steady. He carried no entourage, no suitcase, just quiet confidence. The man approached the counter. "Good evening," he said softly. "I'd like a room for the night, please." Manager Davis didn't even look up from his computer. "Do you have a reservation?" "No," the man replied. "I was hoping you might have something available." Davis sighed dramatically. "Sir, this is the Royal Crest. We're fully booked. You might have better luck at one of the motels down the road." The man nodded politely. "I understand. It's been a long day of travel. If anything opens up, I'd appreciate it." Now Davis looked up, slowly, scanning the man from head to toe. Jeans, jacket, no brand labels. He smirked. "Look, pal, let's not waste each other's time. This isn't the kind of place you just walk into." The few guests nearby glanced over. One clerk behind the desk frowned, recognizing the man's face but staying silent. Davis leaned closer and lowered his voice. "We don't have space for people like you here." Then, with a half smile, he added the line that would come back to haunt him. "Try somewhere cheaper. Maybe they'll have a room for your kind." The man didn't flinch, didn't argue. He simply smiled, calm, almost compassionate, and said, "Sometimes the way you treat a stranger says more about your business than your stars." And at that moment, the story that would shake the entire hotel began. The Royal Crest Hotel wasn't just another five-star property. It was the crown jewel of the city. Crystal chandeliers dangled from the ceiling like frozen waterfalls. Every inch of marble reflected ambition. Guests arrived in sleek black, cars their luggage carried by bellboys who were trained to smile even when insulted. It was a place built on reputation and guarded by arrogance. Manager Edward Davis ruled that lobby like a king. Every morning he walked in 15 minutes early just to make his entrance. Polished shoes clicking across the floor, tie perfectly knotted, voice sharp and commanding. To the staff, he was both a perfectionist and a nightmare. He called it discipline. They called it ego in a suit. When Davis spoke, people listened, not because they respected him, but because they feared his temper. He believed power came from intimidation. The louder he spoke, the smaller others felt. So when Jonathan Roumie walked in that rainy evening, no reservation, no entourage, just calm humility, Davis didn't see a guest. He saw an inconvenience. At the reception desk, Lena, one of the junior clerks, typed quietly. She was new, soft-spoken, observant, the kind of employee who believed every guest deserved kindness no matter how they looked. The moment she saw Jonathan, she smiled. Something about his calmness stood out from the usual chaos. He didn't rush. He didn't demand. He simply waited his turn, hands folded patiently. "Good evening, sir," Lena said before Davis could interrupt. "How may I help you?" Jonathan nodded appreciatively. "I was hoping for a room, just for tonight." Before she could check the system, Davis appeared beside her, straightening his jacket like a general stepping onto a battlefield. "Lena, it's fine," he said, dismissing her gently but firmly. "I'll handle this." Jonathan gave a small smile. "Thank you. I appreciate it." Davis barely glanced at him. "We're fully booked. Every suite, every standard room. You might want to try the Crossway Inn down the street. They're more flexible with guests like you." Lena frowned. "Actually, sir, I think room 214 is not available," Davis snapped, cutting her off. "Maintenance issue, isn't that right, Mark?" He turned to another clerk who quickly nodded, unsure why. Jonathan kept his composure. I see. That's unfortunate. I don't need anything extravagant, just a roof and some rest. Davis smirked. This isn't a charity, Mr. Roumie, he replied softly. Jonathan Roumie. Davis paused for half a second, the name tickling the edge of recognition, but his arrogance drowned out curiosity. Right. Well, Mr. Roumie, as I said, there's nothing I can do. Our guests book weeks in advance. The lobby continued to hum with activity, heels clicking, phones ringing, conversations rising and falling. But in that small circle near the counter, time seemed to slow. Lena looked between them, her voice gentle. Sir, if you'd like, I can make you a cup of tea while you wait. Maybe something will open up. Jonathan smiled warmly. That's very kind of you. Davis rolled his eyes. We're not running a cafe, Lena. This isn't a roadside inn. The kindness in the room froze instantly. Lena lowered her gaze, embarrassed. Jonathan, however, didn't lose his calm. It's all right, he said quietly. Kindness doesn't need permission. A few nearby guests noticed the exchange. A couple whispered. One of them, a teenage boy, whispered to his mother, Isn't that the guy who plays Jesus on that show? His mother shrugged. Maybe. Don't stare. But Davis had already made up his mind. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the counter. Listen, Mr. Roumie, I deal with important people all day. CEOs, diplomats, artists, politicians. If we gave rooms to everyone who looked tired, we'd be out of business. Jonathan studied him for a moment, his expression unreadable. And yet, without people, there'd be no business. Davis smirked, missing the weight of those words. Well, I'll tell you what. If you come back tomorrow dressed like one of your important people, maybe I'll reconsider. Lena looked horrified. Mr. Davis, that's not... He cut her off again. Enough, Lena. Get back to work. Jonathan simply nodded. I understand. Then he placed a small envelope on the counter. If someone finds an empty room tonight, this might help with the deposit. Davis looked at it, then pushed it back toward him without even opening it. We don't take charity cases here. Jonathan's eyes softened. No, you don't. He picked up the envelope, turned toward the door, and quietly said, Thank you for your time. The glass doors opened again, letting in a breath of cold air and the scent of rain. As he stepped outside, the sound of thunder rolled in the distance, soft at first, then louder, echoing through the marble hall like a warning. Lena watched him leave, guilt tightening in her chest. Something about the moment felt wrong, too harsh, too final. She didn't know who he truly was. None of them did. But before the night was over, every person in that lobby would remember his name. Outside the hotel, the rain poured harder, drumming against the glass doors like a warning the staff refused to hear. Inside, the royal crest shimmered as always. Glittering chandeliers, champagne laughter, heels clicking over marble. But for those who had seen what just happened, the glow felt colder now. Manager Edward Davis straightened his tie, pretending nothing unusual had occurred. He hated moments that made him feel small. The man in the brown jacket, that nobody, had walked out with dignity, and somehow that bothered him more than if he'd caused a scene. Power, Davis believed, came from being feared, not from being respected. And that calm smile on the stranger's face, it had felt like quiet judgment. Back to work, he barked, snapping his fingers. We've got real guests to serve. Lena kept typing, trying to hide her unease. She couldn't shake the man's words. Kindness doesn't need permission. Something about that line lingered in her mind like a melody she couldn't stop hearing. Moments later, two men in suits approached the desk. One was older, polite but clearly impatient. The other younger, carrying a briefcase and a sleek envelope. We're here to finalize the inspection, the older one said. Corporate's expecting the manager. Davis immediately switched tones, all charm now. Of course, gentlemen. Always a pleasure to work with the main office. He motioned toward the lounge. Please have a seat, I'll bring you the reports myself. They nodded and stepped aside, whispering quietly. Lena overheard fragments. Acquisition, new owner, evaluation team. Her heart skipped. Acquisition? Was the hotel being sold? She turned toward Davis. Sir, did corporate say something about an inspection today? Davis waved a dismissive hand. Routine nonsense. Some new investor wants to play boss for a week, make us jump through hoops. Happens every few years. He leaned closer. You'll learn something, Lena. People with money love reminding you they have it. But the word investor triggered something deep in her gut, and she remembered the way the man outside had smiled when Davis refused him a room. There had been something knowing in that look, as if he already understood the place better than its manager did. Minutes passed. Guests came and went, and then a hush. Through the glass doors, Jonathan Roumie stepped back in. This time, not as a weary traveler, but as a man walking into purpose. His jacket was still damp from the rain, but he carried himself with quiet grace. The same calm eyes, the same peaceful expression. Yet this time something in his presence commanded attention. Even Davis blinked, thrown off for a split second before regaining his smirk. Back again? He asked mockingly. Forget something? Jonathan smiled faintly. Not really. I was just waiting for the right time to check in. Davis crossed his arms. We've been over this, sir. We don't have... Before he could finish, the two corporate representatives stepped forward, suddenly attentive. Mr. Roumie, the older one said warmly. It's good to finally meet you in person. The room froze, Lena's eyes widened. Davis's smirk faded. Meet him? Davis repeated, confused. Yes, the man said, shaking Jonathan's hand. Our new majority owner. The papers went through last week. We were told he might arrive today to evaluate the staff personally. The silence in the lobby was deafening. The guests who had witnessed the earlier exchange now turned their heads, whispering, gasping, some even recording on their phones. Davis's face drained of color. His throat went dry. Wait. You mean, he is the new owner? Jonathan nodded gently. I am. Though I didn't want to arrive as the owner. I wanted to arrive as a guest. He let the words hang in the air. Calm, measured, heavy. I wanted to see how people are treated when you think they don't matter. Every eye in the lobby was now fixed on Davis. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. His arrogance, his shield for so long, had vanished. Jonathan turned to Lena, his tone soft. Thank you for your kindness earlier. You reminded me that even one person's compassion can change the atmosphere of a room. Lena swallowed hard, her eyes misty. You're welcome, sir. Jonathan faced Davis one last time. Sometimes people believe titles define respect. But the truth is, respect defines the title. And then, turning to the executives, he said quietly, let's continue this conversation in my office. As he walked past Davis, the manager's knees almost buckled. The staff stood frozen, half in awe, half in shame. Outside, the rain finally began to stop. Inside, the storm had only just begun. For a long, breathless moment, no one moved. The words new majority owner hung in the air like thunder after lightning, loud even in silence. Every eye in the lobby was fixed on Jonathan Roumie. The man they had just seen turned away. The same man who now stood there, calm, gentle, yet unmistakably powerful. Manager Edward Davis felt the ground tilt beneath him. His throat tightened, his palms grew slick with sweat. He had spent years in this hotel, years climbing the corporate ladder, years building his reputation, and in less than a minute, everything he had built felt like sand slipping through his fingers. Lena, meanwhile, stood behind the counter, stunned. Her heart was racing, her mind trying to catch up with what had just happened. He's the owner? The man she'd offered tea to? The one who had been insulted in front of everyone? She felt both relief and awe, and an unexpected pride that she had chosen kindness when it mattered most. Across the lobby, whispers began to spread like wildfire. That's him and the actor. He owns the hotel? No way. I saw the manager throw him out. Phones came up. Some guests started recording. Others simply watched, their luxury drinks forgotten on the marble tables. Jonathan, however, seemed completely unfazed by the chaos. He simply turned, offering a small smile to the executives beside him. Shall we continue? His voice was soft, but in that silence it carried more authority than a shout ever could. The older executive nodded quickly. Of course, Mr. Roumie. We have the documents ready in your office upstairs. But Jonathan didn't move right away. He turned back toward the front desk, toward Davis, who now stood frozen, eyes wide, face pale. I believe, Jonathan said gently, we still have some unfinished business at the front counter. Every employee stopped breathing. Davis forced a shaky smile. Sir, I had no idea. I mean, if I'd known who you were. Jonathan raised a hand. That's just it, Mr. Davis. You shouldn't have to know who someone is to treat them with dignity. The words hit harder than any reprimand. They sliced through the room, clean and undeniable. Lena blinked back tears. Mark, the other clerk, lowered his gaze in shame. Even the bellboys at the far end stopped pretending to polish brass. They just stood there, listening. Davis stammered, his voice cracking. Sir, I was only following policy. Policy? Jonathan asked softly. Is it policy to judge guests by their clothes? By their silence? By how much you think they're worth? Davis opened his mouth, but no words came. His lips trembled. Jonathan took a small step closer, his tone still calm, never cruel. I came here last night because I wanted to understand this place. To see it not as a businessman, but as a traveler. To see whether the spirit of hospitality still lived in the walls of the Royal Crest. He paused, looking around the room. Some of the guests lowered their eyes, realizing how quickly they too had judged. And now I know, Jonathan continued, that luxury means nothing if it isn't matched with grace. The silence was absolute. Even the sound of the rain outside seemed to fade. Jonathan turned toward Lena. Miss, may I ask your name again? Lena, she said quietly, her voice trembling slightly. He smiled. You showed kindness when it wasn't required. You reminded me that compassion is still alive in this place. Thank you. Lena nodded, blinking rapidly to hold back tears. It was just the right thing to do, sir. Jonathan turned back to Davis. I'd like you to think about something, he said. When a stranger walks through those doors, you have a choice, to make them feel smaller, or to remind them they still matter. Davis looked down. For the first time in years, he had no defense. His pride in his armor had cracked completely. Jonathan nodded gently, then faced the executives. Let's begin the meeting upstairs. As he walked past the counter, a hush followed him, not from fear, but from reverence. He didn't gloat. He didn't humiliate. He didn't demand an apology. His calmness was the apology the room owed him. When the elevator doors closed behind him, whispers filled the silence he left behind. A guest leaned toward another. He could have fired that guy on the spot, the other replied softly. Maybe that's what makes him different. Lena glanced toward Davis. The once proud manager now looked small, lost, his reflection trembling in the glossy counter. He finally whispered to no one in particular. I've been in charge here for years, but I've never really led. For the first time, his voice carried something real. Regret. Upstairs, as Jonathan stepped into the executive suite, he paused by the window. The city lights glowed below, reflections dancing across the rain-soaked glass. He sighed quietly. Respect, he murmured to himself, costs nothing, yet so few can afford it. Down in the lobby, the piano began to play again, soft, slow, almost like a prayer. And though no one said it aloud, everyone there knew. The hotel would never be the same again. Morning light poured through the tall glass windows of the Royal Crest, casting golden streaks across the marble floor. The rain was gone, but the storm that had passed through the lobby the night before still lingered. Not outside, but inside the hearts of those who had witnessed it. Word had spread quickly. By sunrise, everyone in the hotel, from the front desk clerks to the cleaning staff, knew the truth. The man their manager had humiliated was Jonathan Roumie, the new majority owner of the entire Royal Crest chain. Some employees whispered in the hallways, others checked the news on their phones. Every conversation carried the same tone, disbelief and shame. In the staff room, Lena sat in silence, staring at her cup of tea gone cold. She replayed every moment from the night before, Jonathan's calmness, his quiet strength, his words that seemed to echo louder the more she thought about them. You shouldn't have to know who someone is to treat them with respect. It wasn't just a line. It was a truth that had cracked open the facade of the hotel. At exactly 9 a.m., a notice went out. Mandatory staff meeting, grand lobby, attendance required. Davis stood near the elevators, pale and sleepless. His perfect hair was messy for once, his confidence gone. He had spent the night drafting apology emails, calling contacts, rehearsing explanations. But nothing he practiced felt enough. Now, as he stepped into the lobby, he felt every stare pierce through him. The same people who used to fear him now looked at him with quiet judgment. Moments later, the elevator chimed, and Jonathan Roumie stepped out. He wasn't surrounded by bodyguards or executives. Just himself, wearing the same brown jacket from the night before. The entire lobby went silent. Jonathan looked around the room, his gaze warm but steady. "Good morning, everyone," he said softly. "Thank you for coming on such short notice." Even his voice carried peace, but beneath that peace was something stronger, a sense of justice that made every word feel deliberate. "I've spent the last 12 hours thinking," he began, "about what this hotel represents, and what it should represent." He paced slowly, hands clasped behind his back. "I didn't come here last night to test anyone. I came as a traveler, tired from work, looking for a place to rest. That's all." He turned toward Davis. The manager's knees nearly buckled under the weight of that calm stare. "But what I found," Jonathan continued, "was a reminder that even the most beautiful buildings can lose their soul when people forget the purpose behind them." He glanced around at the staff, clerks, bellboys, housekeepers, waiters, every one of them standing perfectly still. This place doesn't exist because of its chandeliers or five-star reviews. It exists because of you, because of how you make others feel when they walk through those doors. A few heads nodded. Some looked down, ashamed. Jonathan's tone softened. "Most of you have shown kindness, grace, and patience. You make this place what it is." He paused, then turned back to Davis. "But one person forgot that truth." Davis swallowed hard, his voice trembling. "Sir, Jonathan lifted a hand gently. "Please, let me finish." The silence deepened. "Mr. Davis," Jonathan said evenly, "I've read your record. 10 years of service, strong results, excellent business growth. But somewhere along the way, you started managing people by rank, not by respect." Davis's eyes welled up, but he said nothing. Jonathan stepped closer, close enough that his words couldn't be mistaken for anger. "I could dismiss you today, and maybe that would be fair. But fairness and justice aren't always the same thing." He looked over at Lena, who stood nervously near the counter. "Miss Lena reminded me that kindness still lives here. She treated me like a guest when I looked like a burden. And because of her, this hotel still has hope." The staff turned toward her, murmuring. Her cheeks flushed pink. Jonathan continued. "From this moment on, Lena will be the new branch manager of the Royal Crest Hotel." Gasps filled the room. Lena's hands shot to her mouth. "Sir, I don't know what to say." "Say nothing." Jonathan smiled gently. "Just keep being the person you already are." Then he faced Davis again. "As for you, Mr. Davis, you'll remain with the company, but not in this role. You'll be transferred to a smaller branch, not as punishment, but as perspective." Davis nodded slowly, eyes glistening. "I understand. And I'll learn that lesson." Jonathan's expression softened. "That's all I wanted to hear." He turned to everyone. "Let this be a reminder. Titles fade, wealth shifts, but how you treat others, that's what people remember long after you're gone." A hush followed his words, heavy, reverent. Then one by one the staff began to clap. It wasn't loud applause. It was slow, genuine, filled with gratitude and respect. Lena stepped forward. "Thank you, sir. Not just for this, but for reminding us who we should be." Jonathan smiled faintly. "It's not me who reminded you, Lena. It's the rain. It washes away what's false, marred, and leaves what's real." He turned, walking back toward the elevator. And as the doors closed behind him, the reflection of the golden morning light caught his calm face. Serene, unbothered, powerful in silence. The Royal Crest had a new owner, a new leader, and most importantly, a new heart. The applause faded slowly, like the echo of a prayer. For a long moment, the lobby of the Royal Crest was wrapped in stillness. Not of shock anymore, but of reflection. Jonathan Roumie stood quietly, the morning sun glowing faintly through the glass walls, painting his face in soft gold. He didn't speak right away. He simply looked around, at the faces, the staff, the guests, the place that had revealed so much about human nature in just a single night. "Thank you," he finally said, voice gentle yet carrying to every corner of the room. "Thank you for listening and for understanding." He turned to Lena, who still stood near the counter, her expression a blend of gratitude and disbelief. "I know this is unexpected," he said, "but I trust you'll lead with compassion. That's what this place needs." Lena nodded, still overwhelmed. "I'll do my best, sir," Jonathan smiled. "That's all any of us can do." Then he looked at Edward Davis and the man who had built walls of pride around himself for years. Now those walls were gone. His voice trembled when he spoke. "Sir, I want to say something. Not because I have to, but because I need to." Jonathan nodded gently. "Go ahead." Davis swallowed, his eyes glistening. "I've spent my whole career chasing numbers, occupancy, ratings, profits, thinking success meant power. But last night, I realized I've been running a hotel without a heart. And a place without heart isn't worth leading." His voice cracked. "I can't undo how I treated you, but I can change how I treat others from this moment on." Jonathan placed a hand on his shoulder, a simple human gesture. "Then your real career begins today." The sincerity in that moment was enough to draw quiet tears from more than one person in the room. Jonathan stepped back, scanning the lobby once more, the polished marble, the chandelier, the staff standing straighter now, not from fear but from pride. He could see change already taking root, in posture and expression and spirit. "Every great place," he said softly, "isn't known for how much it owns, but how much it gives." He smiled faintly. "This building has luxury. Now let's make sure it has love." A quiet ripple of emotion moved through the crowd. The staff exchanged glances, many nodding. Some had tears in their eyes. The bellboy, Miguel, a young man who had barely spoken before, suddenly stepped forward. "Sir?" he asked hesitantly. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course," Jonathan replied. Miguel looked nervous. "You could have shouted last night. Fired people. Made a scene. But you didn't. Why?" Jonathan smiled kindly. "Because anger only teaches fear, Miguel. But patience, that teaches character." He paused, then added, "And sometimes the loudest voice in the room is the one that doesn't need to shout." The boy nodded, visibly moved. "Thank you, sir." Jonathan turned toward the elevator, his steps slow, thoughtful. Every pair of eyes followed him. Even the guests, once silent observers, now stood in quiet admiration. Just before the doors closed, he looked back one last time. "I came here as a stranger," he said, "but I'm leaving grateful, because you all reminded me what hospitality really means. It isn't about rooms, ratings, or riches. It's about respect." The elevator doors slid shut and the soft ding echoed like an ending note in a song. For a long while, no one moved. Then Lena took a deep breath and turned to the staff. "All right, everyone," she said with a smile that was both firm and kind. "We've got work to do. Let's make sure that from now on, everyone who walks in here, whether they're rich or poor, known or unknown, feels welcome." The team nodded. Even Davis smiled faintly, humbled but hopeful. Outside, the city was alive again. Sunlight bouncing off the wet streets, cars honking, life moving forward. But something inside the Royal Crest had changed forever. Guests noticed it that very day. The warmth in the greetings, the genuine smiles, the care in every gesture. And for weeks afterward, reviews online spoke of a hotel that feels different, a staff that treats you like family, a place with soul. But the most surprising part came a month later. A small framed quote appeared at the front desk. Simple, elegant, resting beside the golden guest book, it read, "Respect isn't about who deserves it, it's about who gives it." J. Roumie, every guest who checked in saw it. Many stopped to take a picture. Some just smiled quietly, as if reminded of something they'd forgotten, and at the bottom of that frame, in neat handwriting, was a small note. Dedicated to the guest we almost turned away, and the lesson he left behind. That day, the Royal Crest wasn't just a hotel. It had become a story, a living reminder that true greatness doesn't shine from chandeliers or gold-plated signs. It shines from people who choose kindness when it's hardest to give. The evening light slanted through the tall windows of the Royal Crest, painting long amber lines across the marble floor. The day's noise had softened. Guests chatted quietly. The piano hummed in the background, and for the first time in years, the hotel felt peaceful. Not perfect, but alive. At the reception desk, Lena stood with a small smile, her posture no longer uncertain but steady. She had spent the day listening, guiding, and teaching her team what Jonathan had shown her, that leadership doesn't mean control. It means care. Beside her, Edward Davis, the former manager, was carefully helping a guest with their luggage, something he hadn't done in years. The guest thanked him warmly, unaware of who he used to be. For once, Davis didn't care about the title. The humility on his face said more than any apology could, and framed at the counter right under the golden logo, hung the quote Jonathan had left behind. Respect isn't about who deserves it. It's about who gives it. It had become the hotel's new motto, a compass that quietly guided every decision, every interaction. That night, Lena found herself alone in the lobby after closing. She sat by the large window looking out at the city lights dancing in the rain. She thought about everything that had happened, the storm, the words, the silence, and the man who had changed everything with nothing but grace. In her heart, she whispered, "Thank you, Mr. Roumie." And maybe it was just imagination, but for a second, she could almost hear his calm voice reply, "Don't thank me. Thank the lesson." Word spread quickly about the night Jonathan Roumie stayed at the Royal Crest. Guests shared their experiences online. Influencers made videos about it. The humble guest who changed a hotel became a trending story for weeks. But more than the fame, it was the feeling that lingered. A quiet reminder that kindness can rewrite even the coldest stories. People started visiting just to see the framed quote. Some came to stay. Others came to apologize. To themselves, to people they'd once ignored. To moments they'd let pride win. And behind every smile at that front desk, there was a little piece of Jonathan's lesson. A few weeks later, Jonathan received a letter, handwritten, elegant. It was from Lena. "Dear Mr. Roumie, I wanted to tell you that the hotel feels different now. Not because of the decor or the guests, but because of the spirit inside it. Mr. Davis has become one of our best mentors. He treats the team like family. He even started a program to train new staff in empathy and leadership. We call it the Open Door Initiative. Every morning before we open, we read your quote aloud. It reminds us that hospitality isn't about luxury. It's about love. You didn't just check into a hotel that night. You checked into our hearts. With gratitude, Lena and the Royal Crest family." Jonathan read the letter sitting on his porch one quiet morning, coffee in hand, the sky just beginning to blush with sunrise. He smiled, not the smile of pride, but the smile of peace. He folded the letter carefully and placed it inside his worn brown jacket, the same one he'd worn that night, the same one that Manager Davis had once looked down on. He looked up at the sky and whispered a simple prayer. "May we all learn to see beyond appearances and love as if every soul is worth gold." And that, right there, is the heart of this story. Respect is never about status. It's about spirit, because one act of humility can echo farther than a lifetime of ego. The way you treat someone when you think they can do nothing for you, that's who you really are. So if you're watching this right now, ask yourself, when was the last time you showed kindness with no reason, no reward, no audience? Because maybe, just maybe, that person you helped, that stranger you greeted, that moment you chose grace over judgment, could be the very story someone else never forgets. And if you believe, like Jonathan Roumie, that humility is the highest form of strength, then type respect in the comments. Let's fill this space with gratitude, not pride. Because the world doesn't need more powerful people. It needs more people powerful enough to be kind. The richest hearts aren't found in luxury. The strongest leaders don't command, they care. And the truest success isn't what you own, but who you lift. So wherever you are, whoever you meet, leave them better than you found them, because that's what makes an ordinary moment divine.